Hi, I'm Anna, and welcome back to the D1 Audible Cheat Sheets. Rosé is the quiet shapeshifter of the wine world. It looks simple in the glass, but it's actually a series of very deliberate choices about one thing consumers judge instantly: color. And because rosé is so often sold in clear glass, that color becomes a promise. Pale can whisper crisp and dry. Deeper pink can hint at riper and sweeter, even though that association is sometimes completely wrong. So, the winemaker's job is to build a wine whose color, aroma, flavor, and structure all tell the same story. The heart of rosé production starts with how you manage contact between juice and skins. There are three core approaches, and each one creates a different balance of color intensity, fruit character, tannin levels, control, and cost. The first is direct pressing, the cleanest and often the palest path. You take black grapes and either press them as whole bunches or destem them and possibly crush them, then press immediately to minimize maceration. Pneumatic presses are typical, and because rosé juice can be delicate and easily browned, the press is often flushed with inert gas to protect aromas and limit oxidation. After that, the juice is fermented like a white wine. This method can give you some of the lightest colors, but it still isn't automatic. Press pressure matters. The length of pressing matters because a longer press effectively extends skin contact, and how much pressed juice you include matters too. Wines made in this pale restrained style are often labeled vin gris, and some of the lightest colored Provence wines live here. And depending on local rules, you may even co press and co ferment a permitted white variety with the black grapes to help lift acidity and nudge color paler. In Côte de Provence, for example, Vermentino is allowed for rosé, and that kind of blending in the press can be part of how the final style is achieved. The second route is short maceration, where the winemaker chooses a brief window of skin contact before pressing. During this time, the must may be protected with inert gas to reduce oxidation and limit spoilage risk, because you're letting skins and juice mingle on purpose. Time becomes the dial. The longer the maceration, the more color and flavor you extract, and to a lesser extent, tannin. That could be a couple of hours, or it could stretch to a few days depending on the intended style. When the winemaker decides the color and flavor are where they want them, the juice is drained, the skins may be gently pressed, and then the wine is fermented like a white wine. Short maceration often, though not always, produces rosés with deeper color and more obvious black grape character than direct pressing. It's common in more traditional Spanish rosado styles that aren't aiming for the ultra pale Provence aesthetic. And it's also a key part of the identity of Tavel, where rosé is often deeper and more assertive. There's a very practical cousin of short maceration, sanye, the bleeding method, where rosé is produced as a byproduct of making red wine. After crushing, some juice is drawn off to concentrate the remaining must for the red wine, and the bled juice can become a rosé. From a cost perspective, this can be efficient, but there's a stylistic risk. Those grapes were grown and harvested for red wine, not for rosé. So the juice may not have the natural higher acidity and delicate fruit profile you'd want if rosé were the main goal. Still, in the hands of quality focused producers, Sanier can absolutely deliver good to outstanding rosé while simultaneously improving the red. The third method is blending, and it's exactly what it sounds like. A small proportion of red wine blended into a much larger proportion of white wine to create a pink color while keeping the aromatic and flavor profile of the white variety. That's how something like Sauvignon Blanc Rosé can ride the popularity of white Sauvignon Blanc while adding the visual cue of rosé. If a producer already makes both the white and the red, this method is simple and cheap. And in still wine production, it's often linked to inexpensive wines. But it's restricted in many EU geographical indications, partly because many producers argue it lowers the overall quality and seriousness of rosé production. The notable exceptions include Champagne and Franciacorta, where blending is permitted. From a winemaking control perspective, blending is the easiest way to hit a precise color because you're blending finished wines. With direct pressing and short maceration, color decreases during fermentation, so you need experience and predictive skill to land the final shade you want in bottle. Once the color pathway is chosen, rosé quality is often won or lost in the vineyard. A good rosé usually wants medium to high acidity, low to medium alcohol, and fresh fruit character. So, grapes for good to outstanding rosé are often grown in cooler or moderate regions or in cooler sites within warmer regions. Cooling can come from latitude, altitude, aspect facing away from the equator, or proximity to large bodies of water and coastal influence. Another subtle tool is yield. Rosé yields are often higher than for red wines, which slows ripening and helps retain fresher flavors with less concentration, exactly what many rosé styles are chasing. In warmer climates, the vineyard solution is often earlier picking. You harvest sooner to lock in acidity and keep the fruit profile bright and fresh. And because the current market trend leans towards pale rosés with minimal tannin, black grape varieties with low to medium color and tannin can be easier to bend into that style. Harvest timing and tannin ripeness matter more than people think. Grapes for rosé are typically harvested earlier than those for red wines, unless the rosé is coming from a saignée as a red winemaking byproduct. Earlier picking supports the refreshing purpose of rosé, keeping acidity and delivering delicate red fruit notes rather than darker, riper characters. If you're making rosé by short maceration, ripe tannins are important because you are intentionally extracting some phenolics and you don't want green flavors or bitter tannins sneaking in. With direct pressing, tannin ripeness is less critical because skin contact is minimal. How you harvest also connects back to style and logistics. Hand harvesting allows whole bunch pressing, which can keep color low and juice clean. Machine harvesting can be useful in warm climates where night harvesting keeps grapes cool on the way to the winery. It's also fast, which matters when you're trying to pick large volumes at a precise ripeness window, and it can be cheaper in those circumstances. In the cellar, rosé tends to be handled like a white wine. Pre fermentation adjustments to acidity or sugar can be made if needed. Fermentations are usually cool, around 12 to 16 degrees Celsius, because that helps produce and retain aroma compounds. Stainless steel is the default vessel, neutral, clean, and easy for temperature control. Oak is the occasional wildcard, used sometimes new and sometimes old, usually when a producer wants extra texture rather than just fruit brightness. But oak is expensive, and more importantly, the rosé needs enough fruit concentration to carry the oak influence without being dominated by it. Most rosés use cultured yeast, and some strains are chosen specifically to enhance fruity aromas. If residual sugar is part of the style, rosé typically gets there in the same two ways as other wines: stopping fermentation before dryness, or fermenting dry and then blending in a sweetening component. Both methods require careful stability thinking because sugar can become fuel for microbes later if the wine is not protected properly. Malolactic conversion is usually avoided in rosé. Those buttery flavors don't fit most rosé styles because they can mask fresh fruit, and rosé is often designed to be refreshing, which means retaining acidity is usually the point. Maturation is typically brief, but it can be used as a deliberate stylistic choice. A short period on lees can add texture and body, and a short period in oak can do the same, with new oak also adding flavors like vanilla and clove. These texture building choices usually push the wine into at least mid price territory because time in the winery costs money and barrels cost money. And even when rosé isn't made by the blending method, blending still shows up at the end. Many producers blend batches just before finishing and packaging to fine tune color, adjust flavor balance, or ensure consistency across lots. Because again, the consumer sees the color before they taste the wine. Finally, rosé is almost always polished for appearance. Clarity is part of its appeal, so fining and filtration are common. Sterile filtration becomes especially important for rosés with residual sugar because you don't want microbes in bottle feeding on that sugar and creating unwanted fermentation after packaging. Rosé may look like a single shade of pink, but it's really a string of precision decisions. Skin contact, oxygen management, vineyard freshness, cool fermentation, and a strong sense of what color is promising the drinker before the first sip. I hope this helps with your prep, and I'll see you in the next episode.